Well, let's talk about the minor league all-stars, the guys of the future. And why wouldn't we do that with Kenny Van Doren of Astros Future as we look at their Astros all-star team for their minor league system? Let's get into it right now.
Jainer Diaz, this is Locked On Astros.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Astros, your daily Astros podcast. Here are your hosts, Eric the Man Huysman and Brett H-Town Wheelhouse Chancey.
We are Locked On Houston Astros, and we hope that you join us for a daily Locked On Astros podcast. My name is Eric Huysman. He's Brett Chancey, and we're being joined by Astros Future writer Kenny Van Doren. Welcome back, Kenny. It's always great to have you on the podcast. But you know that when we have him on, that means we're going to be talking some Astros prospects. And I know that the farm system is looking a little bit bleak, but we'll talk about this and more on today's episode. But this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you can get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today, and hopefully you'll win. So I know that the Astros didn't do a lot of winning this year, Kenny, but one thing that we got to see was Zach Cole. We'll ask you, was he on your radar to make this type of impact? And we'll ask you a whole bunch of other questions. But first of all, go ahead and tell people where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, I'm not tweeting about the Astros as much as I used to. It's not my main priority anymore. But you follow me on Twitter at the Vandalorian. You can always follow Jimmy, everything he's doing at Astros Future, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok. I know he's doing it everywhere, and we do the podcast every couple of weeks.
Yeah, definitely. Kenny, and it's just great having you on because your knowledge and understanding of this farm system. And, I know you're doing a lot of stuff with the Missouri football team. You're out there, covering that. And basically you kind of got a lot of irons in the fire, but I still think that the lane that you really excel in and have, for us is the Astros. And I want to start out with one of our favorites, a guy that we had on the show, Walker Janek. We had him on. We actually talked to him the day before he signed his contract with the Astros. He was named as the catcher of this all-star team that was put out, the list. We've got all the position players there. He has strong offensive numbers and a 31% caught stealing rate. What are some of the standout traits, both on the field, off the field, that you believe maybe set him apart this season? Is there anything that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is I was talking with Jim Callis and MLB Pipeline, and I was like, are there any similarities here with Corey Lee? Because a lot of the talk about Walker Janek is that he's a great framer. He can throw. His pop time is a lot better than the average catcher in the minor leagues, and he's all around possibly the best defensive catcher in the minor leagues right now. And that's probably, a good spot for the Astros. You don't really have that, guy right now in the system or just atop the system on the big league club that probably can mirror what he's doing. And so I was kind of starting to think that is this going to be like a Corey Lee situation where the power starts to dip, the offensive contributions start to dip. And he was like, no, it's like he's going to be so much worlds better than what Corey Lee was coming up through the system. And I remember everyone was, begging for Corey Lee to come up at certain parts when he was playing. And there was a reason why he just kind of got held back at times. And they're really hoping that that's not going to be the same for Walker. I mean, 65 great arm, 50 great tool. Like the guy's got it all behind the dish. And right now he's in the Arizona Fall League, and he put a good first week together. First couple of performances was hitting the ball over 100 miles an hour. If you can really tap into that raw power, I think you're seeing a guy that can really put the offensive side into it because you're not really worried too much just about what he can do behind the plate.
Oh, Eric, you muted.
What would the ETA be for Walker Janek? Is it next year or the following year?
Right now it's at 2027. I think when you kind of look at that, he only played in high A this season. I was on another podcast recently, and they were talking about, someone asked me, it's like, oh, Dana Brown, the Astros like to push these guys fast. He didn't play higher than, the high A this season. He did not get to the Texas League. He stayed in the South Atlantic League the whole year. I think the Astros kind of realize sometimes that they don't need to push a lot of these college first rounders that fast. I still think he's going to be a guy that's going to be in that conversation, of course, to be invited to big league camp this spring, just with, where they're kind of hoping where Walker Janek will be in the next couple of years. But I still think, that 2027 would make the most sense. Start this next year in Corpus Christi, see what he can kind of do with it, because we'll get to some other of these Texas League guys and AA hitters. It's make or break. That's what's going to shape you moving forward. If you can't hit in the Texas League, there's probably not the best chance that you can hit beyond that.
No, yeah, definitely. And I actually had a conversation with his agent over the season, and at one point he thought he was going to be moved to Corpus, and he said, after midseason, once he gets to Corpus, and it looked like that never really happened. Now you got someone like Joseph Sullivan, outfielder, who really, when I talk to other people about, the Astros farm system outside, they know who Joseph Sullivan is. What do you think for him? He came in, he was in, whether it was high A or double A, he did good. And, he had a great year. Is this an outlier year? Is this a year that if you're Joseph Sullivan, you're building on your confidence? Does this kid even get to AAA next year? What do you see happening with this young outfielder with the Astros?
I'll start off by saying, I was pretty excited about him when he was drafted. I like some of those deep South prospects. I don't think they get enough love. And coming in, he's the grandson of a Huysman Trophy winner, Pat Sullivan, who played quarterback at Auburn. So he's a very athletic background. And the tools wise are off the chart. I think I've said this before. I don't really think there's anyone in the system right now, outside of maybe some guys they drafted this past summer, like Xavier Neyens or Ethan Fryer, some of these pitchers that they took a little bit early on that, you'd probably protect more than anyone. That's probably not, a trade candidate, or you throw someone into a deal. Joseph Sullivan's one of those other ones. You talk about, finishing, having a good year. He struggled, a lot at AA. I think that was something that kind of just got swept under the rug near the end of the year. He played in, I think, 66 games. Or 31 games, posted a 621 OPS at AA, and that just comes with it. He was trying to do a swing change, got a bitter taste in his mouth. He talked to Brian McTaggart over at MLB.com about this, and because Zach Cole got to the major leagues and really didn't need that cup of coffee in the Arizona Fall League, that opened the door for Joseph Sullivan to go out there and finish on a high note, which I think he's really trying to do right now after not having the best finish of the year. But the guy is very interesting. He didn't grow up watching baseball. Like, we talked to him about it on the Astros Future podcast. We tried to get him to tell us who he liked growing up, and he really didn't have an answer. He said, I was just always outdoors, never really watched TV. But the tools are all there. I think he has a very good arm. He's a very good defender. If you watched him in spring training last year, he got a couple opportunities, and I think he's going to be a guy that starts the year in AA. I really like his approach. The guy knows how to take pitches. At one point, he got hit more times than he struck out when he got drafted, like right when he got in the Astros system. So very unique in that sense. And I have a crush on left-handed hitting outfielders, and I think Sullivan will be that next one to really keep your eye on. And still a day 2 pick, but I think there's a lot to be excited about. And I think next year, probably by the end of the year, he might be biting at that opportunity to be in AAA.
42 stolen bases this year. I know it was with a 220 batting average, 798 OPS. But like you said, once he got up to Corpus, he struggled a lot. So he did have the 2 home runs. He added 8 stolen bases. But if he's, I don't know if, do you think that he's going to profile as a better than a 230 type hitter once he gets to big leagues? Or is that kind of where you think he's going to end up?
Yeah, I think that 240, 260 range is probably where it is. But I think what's really going to, eat up a lot of those numbers, Eric, is you're going to be looking at the on-base percentage the most with a guy like Joseph Sullivan. Guy posted 462 on-base percentage in a very hitter-friendly league in the South Atlantic League. Especially for a lefty, but that still, has to do with the 65 walks he drew. And let me see if the hit by pitches on here as well. He got hit by pitch 20 times, 14 times in the South Atlantic League in 341 plate appearances. Maybe I can go and look up that, like, where that stood in the South Atlantic League, but the guy just has a good approach. And we have some too. Why are you getting dinged so much? And he doesn't really know. He just thinks like, sometimes he might be on the plate a little closer to the plate. But I really like the character of Joseph Sullivan too. I think there's just a lot of positives in his game right now. And, if he can fix, get a hold of those swing changes in the Arizona Fall League and then into spring training, I think you're looking at a guy you really want to keep your eyes on.
He probably has some secret video of like Craig Biggio getting hit.
I was about to say Biggio.
Yeah, him and where BGO is. It was almost like he was purposely chasing Don Baylor's hit by pitch record. Just leaning into it just a little bit.
Yeah. So, guys, we're going to continue this conversation. Thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day.
Hey, everybody, it's H.M. Wheelhouse here with Locked On Astros, and this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's a 401k, your properties, your investments. And when you don't have the full picture, then you can end up leaving money on the table. And I've told you before that if you don't control your money will control you. So Monarch is built for people like you, busy people with real lives, people with other things going on. And if you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch Money is here for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization for your spending, and finally feel like you control your money without touching a spreadsheet. Maximizing investments, increasing your savings rate, and easily reviewing your finances with your partner or your financial advisor. Keeping a clear view of your financial health week to week, long term is the way to go. So don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB.
Hey guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. We'll be here all off season, no matter what happens. If the Astros make a big free agent signing, if they make a trade, whatever goes on, Brett and I will be here for the Locked On Astros podcast. We're your team every day. So, Kenny, I know that we're looking at the Astros right now. They're kind of at the crossroads of, do we continue to try to win? Do they continue to try to build the farm system? I know that a lot will depend on where the Astros rank, depending on Kevin Alvarez and some other players down the road. But people, before we get back into questions, people look down on the Astros farm system. There is some good players down there, right?
Yeah, I understand that the Astros always find just kind of some contributions, but I think it is a very rough spot right now where the Astros kind of stand is, when you look at the top end of the farm system, you got guys that struggled in the big leagues like Jacob Melton, Bryce Matthews, saw his moments of shine, but still, didn't really find it. Walker Janek probably needs to get a little bit together offensively, especially when he's playing in the South Atlantic League. And Miguel Ubola just was very up and down. That's just the top five. And so I think, for the Astros farm system, continue to find these like diamonds in the rough, guys that go from, being a UDFA like Lucas Spence, who I think is a great, name and story in the Astros system, who's ranked 21 by MLB Pipeline and was a UDFA. So, there's always these kind of stories and they find these guys, but I still think they're in a spot right now that they need to see some production, see some guys turn the page. Luis Baez kind of tried to figure it out a little bit down the stretch after having a really rough start to the year. He's already down to number 22, and this guy was supposed to be seen as like the next big time outfielder for the Astros prospects. I know everyone's asking about, Kevin Alvarez, and, I just say be, a little bit, hesitant on what you're seeing. He played really well in the Dominican Summer League as a 17-year-old in his first year. When's the last time the Astros developed a Latin-born position player? It just hasn't happened in a while. And I would just say, just let him take his time. Don't really want to rush this kid. Like they did with some players in the past, Pedro Leon was a little bit older, but they really kind of screwed over his development at times. And with a guy like this, you have a lot of, money, or you put a lot of money into him and you have a lot of trust into him with these tools and the projections. Just kind of let it play out. He has a 2030 ETA for a reason. He's 17 years old. I think he might be in the DSL next year, the FCL. I don't really think he should be in single A to start the year, but maybe he does force the Astros' hand to maybe see a cup of coffee in affiliated baseball.
Yeah. So, right now, position player wise, I think the Astros, they have pretty much a log jam. You got the Zach Coles, you got Jacob Melton, but when you're looking at the pitching, you mentioned Miguel Ubola, his control is his issue. The dude can throw gas. He's got good stuff. He just can't keep it in the zone. Anderson Brito is really shining right now. In the Arizona Fall League, his first two outings have been phenomenal. And then you have another guy Alhambra Santa, who was actually named to the Texas League All-Stars with the hooks, with the 126 ERA, 63 strikeouts, 57 innings pitched. Of guys like this, Ullola, Brito, of course, Alhambra Santa's probably a little bit further behind those guys. Who do you expect to come up and touch the mound there at Dyken Park from AAA Sugarland? I mean, is Anderson Brito, could he leapfrog some of these guys? Could Ethan Pecco make his way to the big ballpark?
Anderson was signed at 20, I think 20 years old, maybe 19. He's 21 right now. I still think that, ETA is probably, 2027, 2028, okay. Like he didn't get past high A and he still had his own struggles, and he's coming back from a shoulder injury too. So, I'm not, looking at it for, not expecting him to really make a huge jump. Want him to maybe see high A, double A again and see where they can kind of go from there, and we'll see how he finishes Arizona Fall League, because it was 19, but one of those just bargain pitchers, just like Miguel Ubola was. That's something that really kind of comes out of it, is that the Astros are good at identifying these pitchers at the last second and getting them on really cheap deals. And Anderson Brito was just another one. I really don't know what the case may be for Miguel Ubola. If you look through my text with Jimmy Price, it's like, hey, he figured it out. He's going to be a starter again. And then he goes out and, gives up 5 runs on 6 walks and only has 2 strikeouts. It's like, all right, back to the bullpen. We just don't know yet. You just haven't seen that, 40 grade control. And I feel like sometimes I can be a little too generous, and but he has all the other tools. He has the fastball. He has, a lot of chasing pitches, and it looked really strong at times in Sugarland. But some guys that might be right behind him that are fighting for those opportunities are Bryce Mayer and Ethan Pecco. These are the 2 guys who are some of the best pitchers in the Astros system last 2 years. I really like Bryce Mayer and what he's kind of accomplished as a 16th rounder in 2024. Got put on the development list to end the year, though, because he hit an innings limit. But a lot of his pitches are above average, and I think that's really good to see. Fastball, curveball, both above it. Those are his 2 best pitches. 4.11 ERA this year, but the thing that really jumped out to me was 112 strikeouts and 87 2/3 innings and a 1.17 whip between 2 levels. I really like where they're kind of going with him, and there's 3 levels. But yeah, I think where they're going with Bryce Mayer, and him and Ethan Pecco will be 2 guys that you'll see probably in big league spring training this year.
Yeah, I know the Astros have had a better success developing international pitchers. Luis Garcia was kind of a guy that kind of came out of nowhere, and they've had some others. But I know that there's a logjam at third base at the big league level. You've got two guys trying to play the same position. And then you had the guy that Bregman essentially handed the keys to, Shea Whitcomb. It looks like he's not going to get any playing time with the Houston Astros. What do you think is going to end up happening with Shea Whitcomb?
I don't really necessarily think that maybe that was the case with Shea. I think a lot of people were more bullish about his defensive abilities. He really improved. I think that was noticeable. But over the last 2 years, I think even MLB Pipeline kind of dubbed it. He was a little erratic at third base, and I think the only place he was really strong at was at second near the end. And he's just a utility guy by trade. I think that's exactly what he needs to be. And if that's with the Astros, that's with another team, I think you're going to get a guy that can bring you sneaky power and play a bunch of positions, really kind of master first base and left field. If he can add those, he played it a little bit, if he can really add those to his toolkit, I think that looks like a really good utility player of the future. I don't really necessarily think that, he's a starter in the long term for the Astros anymore.
When we come back from our break, I do want you to talk about Zach Cole. I know Eric had mentioned him earlier. Zach Cole hit the scene just like gangbusters. This kid, he looks the part. He came up with a lot of confidence, and we see a lot of young guys come up with hot starts. But I definitely, on the other side of this, would like to see what you think the long-term outlook looks on him as a talent evaluator and someone who pays attention to the minors this year. But we'll do that after we talk about game time. Hey everybody, it's H-Town Wheelhouse here with Locked on Astros, and this episode is brought to you by Ruget. Actually, it's by FanDuel. FanDuel is America's #1 sports book. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss right now. New customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. That's right. Pick a bet and put down $5. If it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets. to use across the app. I love FanDuel. It gives you so many ways to play. You can build parlays. You can do player parlays. You can even follow live lines as they happen. It makes watching football even more fun, whether your fantasy football team is crumbling, as mine is the last 2 weeks, or whether you're seeing a lot of success. Casual fans or you love diving into stats, it doesn't matter. FanDuel makes the game experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started.
Hey guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day, whether it's on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to us. Go and make us first listen. Apple, Odyssey, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts, go and check us out. We're being joined by Kenny Van Doren from Astros Future, and we're looking at some of the Astros farm system. We're just talking about Shea Whitcomb, and I know he's 27 years old. He did have a good year in the AAA with 20 batting 267, 25 home runs, 16 solo bases, but you would like for this guy to maybe sometime do it with the Houston Astros, but I don't know if he's going to be given a chance. But because of all the injuries this year and all the poor performances, Zach Cole was given a chance, and he took it and seized the moment, so to speak. So what can we expect from Zach Cole?
Yeah, the Astros needed a spark, and I know Chandler Rome of The Athletic and Brian McTaggart and Houston Chronicle wrote it about as well, MLB.com, and yeah, they wrote about it. He really sees that moment and he took a hold of it. He brought exactly what they needed. They needed this speedy kid that come in, hit home runs. That's exactly what he was doing in Corpus Christi and Sugar Land. Coming up through Sugar Land, he was batting .353 with a 1204 OPS in 15 games, 5 home runs of his 18 total hits. He had 16 RBIs, still striking out a good bit with 17 Ks, but the guy was doing it all. And he really earned that opportunity to be there. But he's going to come down to earth. I think that's something that kind of comes with this. He's not going to hit like that forever. Even when he was in the show, he kind of petered off a little bit at the end, but still finished with an 880 OPS in 15 games, 4 home runs of his 12 hits. Half of his hits were for extra bases, but he struck out 20 times in those 15 games. And I think that's where a little bit where the hole is just on Zach Cole's approach right now is he's got great tools. You can run really fast. He has 60 grade run tool, 70 grade arm, 60 grade field. The guy can, be that guy that when Jimmy and I were talking about maybe guys that come up in September is like, this guy might be Derek Fisher. If the Astros make the postseason, he can be that really speedy guy. He can be that outfielder that you need as a replacement, but still that 35 grade hit tool is a little bit of a concern. And I think you saw that at times just with the strikeouts and maybe holes in approach and the swing. So it's just something, really that, he'll probably lean on this spring to clean up a little bit so he can really compete for one of those outfield spots and compete for the opening day roster.
Yeah, because the swing and miss stuff is a huge glaring problem in the Astros lineup. You had Yainer Diaz and Jose Altuve who chased some of the most pitches outside of the strike zone. And that was a theme. 3 or 4 of the hitters in this lineup just chased the heck out of the ball. And that's what you don't want to see. Now, when we're talking about Zach Cole, it automatically makes me think of what place does someone like a Bryce Matthews have, if any? Because if it looks like you're going to have Isaac Paredes back, you're going to have Carlos Correa there in the infield, then you have Jerry Pena, then you have Altuve, who I think is primarily going to play second. Christian Walker's not going anywhere. Where does Bryce Matthews play if he plays? Where does Cam Smith play? Obviously right field. How do you see Cam Smith? How do you see Bryce Matthews in 2026? Because I think they both have 2 different unique situations.
Yeah, it really comes down to, I think those plans they maybe weren't expecting to have Carlos Correa on this team. And when you're kind of looking at the future of those spots, I think someone will probably get moved just position wise, or if there's a trade that opens up, one of those veterans can kind of get out of one of those spots and they do it. I think Cam Smith will probably stick in the outfield, though, for the time being. That left side of the infield is really tied up with Correa and Pena. And in my opinion, I think they should extend Pena and probably buy out some of those arbitration years if they can and really get him kind of locked in through 30 into his early 30s. But just with that as well, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they give Bryce Matthews a look in left or center. A lot of these athletic shortstops that can play around the diamond. They've tried him in the outfield before, and the Astros have not been afraid to do it. You look at Zach DeZenzo, you look at Cam Smith, you look at Shea Whitcomb. I mean, they tried a lot of these infielders in the outfield for a reason, to just kind of extend their abilities to play on the field. I don't think position addition is as big as it used to be in the Astros system, but I think it's still evident that, if they want to get these guys up to the show and not let them peter out in AAA and just kind of waste their development, they might, try to open up spots in left field, especially at home. You're not playing with as much ground at Dyken Park.
I know that you've kind of mentioned it earlier, but Justin wants to know a little bit more about Ethan Frey. He corrected the spelling, but what can you tell us about him?
Yeah, Ethan, coming in third rounder from LSU, good power. I thought he looked really good just offensively. When he got to single A, he played in 26 games post draft, 904 OPS, 3 homers, 5 doubles. But I really like the approach wise for a guy that's coming in. He's very developed. Playing in the SEC is very different for a lot of position players, and hitters. And coming in, he walked 20 times at 25 strikeouts. And I thought that was a really good sign early on for a guy that only played in 26 professional games. So you look at a lot of the power, the 55 grade power is his best tool along with his run. So kind of a little bit above fringe runner. And I think there's things to be excited about, for a right-handed hitting outfielder like himself. A little bit bigger, of course, at 6'6", 225 pounds. If you can really tapping that power and still be an above average runner, I think you're looking at a really good outfielder for the future, and a guy that could probably move up to Double A at some point, next season if things work out offensively as he kind of climbs the ladder.
Yeah, and speaking of guys that played college, played somewhere like LSU, you bring in a kid with a lot of hype this year, right off the draft, Xavier Neyens. The Astros again, actually this year will have their best and lowest draft positions that they've had, in a long time. So that's going to be huge for them. If Hunter Brown can somehow find his way in the top 3 for Cy Young voting, they'll get a pick for that. But I want to talk about Xavier Neyens. This kid just has crazy pop off the bat. Looks like a man-child at his age. He's someone that Astros fans are anxious about, but they still have to be patient because of his age. Or is he a kid that could jump through the system quicker just because he's got high upside?
Yeah, I don't think we really have an example of it when you kind of compare it, Brett.
Right.
Like if you look at it throughout the last couple of years, they've had to go the college route. You lose draft picks and you're trying to stock up and still retool with guys that could play pretty quickly in 2 years or be, trade chips when you look at some of those deals they did, especially with the New York Mets in 2023. 2023. Yeah. So, it's a guy with a very plus raw power. I think that, like you said, just jumps off the chart. 65 grade power tool for an 18-year-old. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. And 60 grade arm as a shortstop, of course. He was a very athletic guy. Still think that hit tool, maybe in the approach is a little bit worrisome, but a good left-handed swing from a shortstop with a 45 grade hit tool is just something you just want to clean up a little bit. He's some arm bar in his swing, so his patience at the plate can lapse, but I think there's things that clean up just once he gets in the Astro system, but really just kind of not really changing too much. Maybe is a good positive as well, in the sense that you don't really want him to lose any of that power. I think Jacob Belton lost a lot of power over the last couple of years climbing the Astro system, hitting a lot more line drives, but really wasn't getting the ball over the fence. And been asked like the Astros about it, and he's kind of got like a response of like, home runs are just kind of like accidental line drives that left the fence, like went over the fence. And but I still think it was just kind of obvious that, that some of these left-handed guys were kind of coming up the system, maybe some changes happened and they kind of lost it. But I really like the power tool of Xavier Neyens, and I think that's cool to see at the shortstop spot if he sticks there. But I think there's some people that might project him to be a third baseman.
I know I saw some people compare him to Austin Riley with the Braves, somebody that could play third base with his body. But the Astros definitely need some left-handed hitting, but that's down the road. I know the Astros can't really rush these guys. I think they finally did it right with Zach Cole. They brought him up when he's healthy and playing good, and so he had some success with that. So going back to Cam Smith, I know he's not a prospect anymore, but do you see some further growth from him in his second year in the big leagues?
Yeah, I think so. When you're a guy that had, what was it, like 30 minor league games under his belt, and didn't even play in the minor leagues last year, I think that probably was a career high in games that he played with the Astros. Really didn't see much of him at the end of the year. I mean, I talked with Ari Alexander, a good amount during the year, and he brought it up to me. It was like we were just talking. He's always kind of going back and forth about, roster moves, what could happen, and we were kind of looking at it. It's like, I mean, do they option him? I mean, they're barely playing him down the stretch into late August, into September. I mean, is it better to just kind of let him finish out the year playing every day at third base, first, right field, and Sugarland, than kind of just having him kind of play every 2 days or fill in at certain spots? I think you definitely are expecting him to take a jump forward. He's not going to be playing in October this year. So, kind of find his footing again, rest up, and go into spring training with a different mindset that, he has to figure this out, or, there might be a spot where someone passes him up. And I really know if that's really the case right now on the roster. We still have to wait and see about, who's going to get non-tendered, who's going to come back, and who they're going to target this offseason.
No, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's really a lot of moves where the Astros could go. Really, nobody knows. We don't know who the hitting coaches are going to be. Have you heard anything on that? Are they looking internally? I mean, is there? I've asked around a lot of people, and nobody's hearing a word about it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I would say I was kind of thinking about this too. I would go external. I think maybe, right. You look at Westlake, who's the hitting coordinator. He's been around in the Astros system for a long time, knows these guys, knows what the Astros are trying to do. But there's been a good amount of overhaul too, with just coordinators and different approaches, different GM, 3 GMs in the last 7 years. So there's been a lot of changes there. I think they probably look externally. If I had to guess, I don't have any names for you though.
All right, to close out the show, do you have any prospects that are not on the top 30 list that we should look out for in 2026?
It's a good question. Let me pull up the Hooks roster because I feel like that's the one that will get my mind going. I think there's it's hard though, because right now, I mean, there's guys on this top 30 list that I would argue probably don't need to be, but some of the guys near the bottom, Alonzo Treadwell really turned it around. He was the Astros pitcher of the year, if I'm not mistaken, in the minor leagues. He really figured it out again, and I think that's great to see for a guy who was a second round pick, because for a long time, the Astros really weren't seeing any success in that second round. I know that you had asked about, some other pitchers, but still trying to pull up this roster. So I'm just looking at Double A because that's kind of the one that can get my mind going. I do like James Hicks, who kind of dropped a little bit at an injury, but he's in the Arizona Fall League. He's pitching well. Some other guys that came up for me are like Derek True, who had another injury. I think he has some wicked stuff. He can really dial it up into the high 90s. He was at high A this year, got nipped by the injury bug. Still think John Garcia might be able to be a little bit of a positive, just offensively wise, if he can turn it around at Double A. Had a really good year at High A, but this past year was a 580 OPS, and so I think he's really kind of treading the line of where he can go from there. There's probably some guys that could be, infielders of the future in the sense of versatility wise. And the one that I'll finish off with is Jerron Williams, who was the 9th rounder in 2023, had a torn labrum this past year and really got delayed coming out of it and got surgery in the spring. So really just kind of slowed him down, but he's in the Arizona Fall League. I really like his speed. He was at Double A this year, only a 654 OPS, but fully healthy. I think he's one of the more better hitters in the Astros system if he really gets that opportunity and chance to play every day. And he could be a guy that could be a utility infielder of the future. He's 25 though, so that's one little worry at Double A.
And see, that's why we bring you on. We throw you a curveball and you knock it out of the park. I love it, Kenny. We appreciate you joining us. I know everyone I talk to after we have your show, people say, I love when Kenny comes on. I love hearing his stuff. So you definitely keep up the good work. And we definitely will have you back, especially as moves are made. If we trade some of these prospects, if we get some prospects in a trade, or, especially, mid-season around draft. But before then, we'd love to have you back.
Yeah, of course. It's always good to be with you guys, and always give me a ring when you need me.
All right. Well, thank you, Kenny. Guys, thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day. For your second listen, go and find All Night Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night until a World Series champion is crowned. Get local analysis on the national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB or on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And guys, we'll see you tomorrow. And thank you for making Locked On Astros podcast your first listen every day.
Go Stros.